Hello, and welcome to part 2 of True Tales of the Ouija Board. To begin from part 1, please click the on-screen link or in the description and comments to be directed to my channel, Let's Read. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Is the Ouija board a harmless toy? Or is it an instrument that connects users to a darker dimension? Or perhaps, does it tap into the unconscious, where our own fears and powers of suggestion create sometimes frightening experiences? Listen to these tales of the Ouija and decide for yourself. Number 1.
I am in my late 30s and now living in Massachusetts where I grew up. I was a middle child of 5 in a very close family. When we were really young, my 2 younger sisters and I were always fascinated with the unknown. We would look in the obituaries in the newspaper to see who had recently passed away, and we would have seances in our garage with some other local neighborhood kids. Usually nothing would happen, but a couple of times some weird things happened that we just could not explain. When my sisters and I were in high school, we learned about Ouija boards. We bought one and began to play with it. 2 of us would get on it, and the other would write everything down. At first it was fun. We talked to several different spirits that told us where they were from and about their families. This went on for weeks. Then, gradually, things started getting a little scary. Eventually, every time we got on the board, the same spirit would come on, who was not very nice. He told us he was the devil, and he was going to get us somehow. He called himself Zozo. When a friend of ours confronted our priest about this name, he got very angry and told us we should not be playing with Ouija boards. They were not toys, and we could get into trouble. He gave his Sunday sermon on the subject. Needless to say, we stopped playing with it. While still in high school, one of my sister's best friends lost her sister in a van accident. She and her sister were very close. She knew of our adventures with our Ouija board and begged my sister to let her come over and use it to talk to her deceased sister. Hesitantly, my sister sat down with her and contacted her sister with the board. Her friend bawled and told her sister how much she loved her and missed her. She didn't want to live anymore without her and wished she could be with her. About 2 weeks later, my sister's friend died in a van accident, exactly the way that her sister had died. My sister took the Ouija board and put it out with the trash, and none of us has touched one since.
Number 2. The first time I ever saw a Ouija board being used, I was the only male in the room. I wasn't using it. I was standing there, watching. I didn't see anything to indicate that the little plastic thing with the window in it was moving on its own. I would have sworn that my girlfriend and her friend were moving the thing. We were in my girlfriend's house. They wanted to talk to the person who lived in the house when it was first built. They got an answer. J. McGillicuddy. I thought they were full of it, making it up as they went along. But then again, there's no way that they could have both come up with the same fictitious name. And I know they didn't plan it ahead of time, because up until an hour prior, they didn't even know the board was in the house. I found it up in the attic when I was weather sealing a drafty window. They got a second answer. The house was actually built at another location in 1913, then moved to its current location. I had noticed on the outside of the house that there were these big round things still attached to the house that looked like big round chain links. Those were to strap the house down when it was moved. I checked out some of the information at the county courthouse, looking at archives of census figures, etc. Indeed, there was a J. McGillicuddy who lived there and operated a saloon that had long since burned down. He died at the age of 33, stabbed to death when he tried to intervene in an altercation between two of his patrons. To this day, I don't know if the girls were making it up. If so, it was quite a hoax, and they're both better tricksters than I ever gave them credit for being. Number 3.
One night, my brother and I were playing with my new Ouija board, and it didn't take long for the entity to come. As soon as it was there, I felt this strange feeling come over me. It felt as if something was inside of me. It got hard for me to breathe, but I didn't say anything. We asked the entity if it was good or evil, and it spelled out, evil. Right then, I knew something was wrong, because the entity was getting upset. It got harder and harder for me to breathe, until finally it felt like something pushed me, and it was over. Ever since that night, strange things have been happening in my home. Doors shut by themselves. I hear strange noises and see shadows in the middle of the night. Although this experience scared me, I still bring out my Ouija and talk to entities, even the upset ones. I ask them what their problem is and see if there's anything I can do to help. I just hope I never run into that same entity that tried to choke me.
Number 4. It was Friday the 13th, and I was with my friends Mike and Andrew. It was a full moon, and I was only into tarot cards because they interest me, but not Ouija boards. They had scared me. But Andrew said he wanted to try it. So Mike took it out, and I sat on the bed, being the recorder. The lights were turned out, and Andrew contacted his grandpa, and he gave all the right answers to questions. Then the candle flames started to rise, so we stopped, but decided to use the Ouija board again the next day. We did, but this time the story is a little different. We used it at Mike's house first, and we got Andrew's grandpa again. We told him to go to Andrew's house because we had to leave Mike's. At Andrew's, we went to his room and started talking to his grandpa again. But the one question Andrew asked, just to make sure it was really him, the board just spelled A-Z, 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 A-Z over and over again, and then told us to go to hell. The light flickered, and we went back to Mike's house. We used the board there, and Andrew's grandpa came to the board and said it wasn't him that had been so rude. He said it was the devil. We asked if we could go to his grandpa's house, and he told us no several times, but we went anyway. We were about several blocks away when the tire on my bike popped as soon as it hit the street. I was in shock. My tires had been in perfect shape, and they just popped. I told Mike and Andrew that I didn't want to use the Ouija anymore, and they said, "Let's ask him one more question." They were becoming obsessed. So we did. Andrew asked the spirit, Andrew's grandpa, to come into our dreams. I had a dream that night that I was in a new house with a huge backyard, but it was foggy and full of vines. I went into a little hut and saw an ant trap and picked it up. As soon as I did, huge bugs came out all over me and I ran. The moment I ran out of the hut, I saw a man in black smiling at me, taunting me. Then he ran up to me, and I woke up. The next day, I told Andrew about my dream, and he said by the description I gave him of the guy in my dream that it wasn't his grandpa, and he had the same man appear in his dream. I must mention that I had candy on me that day, Sour Patch Kids, and every color I picked out was yellow. 80% of the candy in the bag was yellow. What the Ouija board told us was Andrew's grandpa's favorite color. I ran home and wrote on a piece of paper, purple, the color of the candle we used the first night, yellow, his favorite color, and Thomas, his name. I spelled out those 3 words, and through numerology, it came out to 666. Whatever we were contacting was not Andrew's grandpa. I put on my rollerblades, grabbed the paper, and was about to go to Mike's house when my friend Fran appeared at my door. I told her what had happened, and the paper blew out of my hand. Out of nowhere, a breeze had come. I skated over to the paper when I heard Fran scream my name. I turned around and I fell on my face with the paper in front of me. About 8 months later, I wasn't hanging around Mike and Andrew like I used to. Over the summer, I had become closer with new friends, mostly girls, but especially with a girl named Christina, who was very superstitious. She said that she met a girl named Laura, who was raped and had died. Christina wanted to talk to her again tonight, through the Ouija board. I hesitantly said okay. When we used the board, we contacted an old woman named Harriet Finger, who died and who used to own Christina's house. We left the room because we wanted something to eat, but the candle was lit. We went back into the room with our friends Jackie and Sarah, and the candle was out, but there was a huge black spot on her wall from the smoke. Christina started to clean it, but the black stuff wouldn't come off. Jackie told Christina to step back. When she did, tears filled her eyes. The black spot had turned into the faces of 2 women, one looking out the window and one looking very mean down at us. That night, Christina's friend Laura came into my dream. I saw what she looked like and how she died. She said that an evil man named Howard stalked us on the Ouija board and threatened to hurt us, and that he had been the one to write out A-Z, A-Z, A-Z. Number 5.
About 20 years ago, my friend and I decided to start playing around with the Ouija board I received for Christmas. In the interest of fair play, we did it as the box suggested, sitting on chairs facing each other with the board on our knees. We closed our eyes and had my sister act as secretary, recording each letter. My sister was about 13 and was not making anything up, as different friends also stood in for her when she wasn't around. Within minutes, we began to receive sentences that made sense. Eventually, the board told us we were communicating with someone named Savatu. He said he was an Incan warrior and that he wanted to talk to us. My friend and I became addicted to this game, and for weeks we would sit in my room, light incense, smoke cigarettes, and have sessions. Savatu would tell us jokes and ask us questions. After a few weeks, the nature of the messages changed. They became somewhat intimate, menacing, and rude. One night, Savatu told us he wanted us to come away with him. During that same session, the pointer flew out of our hands and hit the wall. At that point, we got freaked out and decided to put the Ouija away for a while. I began having nightmares, and so did my friend. I took to sleeping with a crucifix on and a Bible in bed with me. I began to fear the Ouija board, and my friend said she would take it to her boyfriend's house because he wanted to mess around with it. She was driving out to his house with the board on the seat beside her, and her car began to smoke and stalled on a dirt road. She got out of the car and threw the Ouija board into a cornfield, then got back in the car. It started, and she drove safely to his house. I was very fearful for about a year or so afterward that I was being haunted, but eventually the fear went away. I have never again touched a Ouija, and do not intend to. We're always fascinated with the unknown. We would look in the obituaries in the newspaper to see who had recently passed away, and we would have seances in our garage with some other local neighborhood kids. Usually nothing would happen, but a couple of times some
users to a darker dimension. Or perhaps, does it tap into the unconscious, where our own fears and powers of suggestion create sometimes frightening experiences? Listen to these tales of the Ouija and decide for yourself. Hello, and welcome to part 2 of True Tales of the Ouija Board. To begin from part 1, please click the on-screen link or in the description and comments to be directed to my channel, Let's Read. Otherwise, sit self. Number 1.
I am in my late 30s and now living in Massachusetts where I grew up. I was a middle child of 5 in a very close family. When we were really young, my 2 younger sisters and I were
Back, relax, and enjoy. Is the Ouija board a harmless toy? Or is it an instrument that connects you